Hello everybody, I'm George from Ireland, so welcome back to my channel. I'd like to talk about how this Russo-Ukrainian war is affecting the Russian home front. So not talking about the military campaign at the moment, which obviously hasn't been going well, and some of that is filtering through at home. But there have been these severe sanctions from the European Union, the United States, the UK, some other pro-Western countries like South Korea, Japan, and so forth. So that's obviously hurting them. There's a rampant inflation, up to 20%. The Russian central bank had to take serious measures, grave measures in terms of interest rates to control that. And if they hadn't done that, the inflation would be even worse. But raising interest rates just so high has negative effects in other areas. They've managed to make the ruble recover almost all the ground it lost in the last 7 weeks, because it's 7 weeks today since this illegal war of aggression commenced. But Putin is more paranoid than ever, which is why there is such stringent censorship, and they've closed down human rights organizations such as Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, and so forth, declaring people those extremists, anyone who would contradict anything he has to say. So civil societies more or less ceased to exist. Memorial, which was a human rights organization, has been shuttered. It existed in the late 80s, and it was documenting crimes committed by the Soviet government against its own people since the inception of the Soviet state, and by some of its successor states, including the Russian Federation, as in people who were detained illegally, even against the laws of the Soviet Union itself, or the Russian Federation, the very wide-scale use of torture, the massive scale slaughter under Stalin and so on, the deliberate policy of starvation of millions of ethnic minority citizens, and so forth. Thank you, Daniel. I sometimes like to wear something slightly different. So if you look at the thumbnails, you can tell which thing I'm wearing today rather than changing my top. I almost never wear baseball caps. It's almost like disguise for me. But Putin was in the KGB, Комитет государственной безопасности, and so he's always thought that there are enemy agents everywhere, that any dissent, that surely has to be some foreign machination behind that. But he's got really worried because the American intelligence prior to this Ukraine war was frighteningly accurate. That's why it is noise that his former aide, Vladislav Surkov, is under house arrest. Supposedly that there is an investigation, and about 150 officers of various intelligence agencies have been arrested. And their intelligence agencies are huge. Russia's a country of 140 million people, and they've got hundreds of thousands of people in the intelligence agencies, which is a huge waste of money. They're not even that good. They're rather the Keystone cops of the intelligence world, flat-footed, always getting caught, always screwing up. I know every intelligence agency messes up occasionally, but the Ruskies have a richly deserved reputation for messing up more than most. I mean, Salisbury would be a textbook example of that, making it absolutely blatant it was them, and not even managing to kill the guy. Yeah, they did manage to kill someone completely unrelated to their mission. The investigation in Russia is supposedly £4 billion worth of equipment or funds were embezzled by the security services when they were supposed to be using that to create a network of agents in Ukraine, pro-Moscow agents. £4 billion, that is a staggering sum of money, especially somewhere like Ukraine, which is not rich at all, which even before the war was the poorest country in Europe. I mean, poorer than Moldova. You would have been able to pay an awful lot of douceur for that and buy people's loyalty. So, and Surkov, it was very high up. He was deputy prime minister at one stage. Admittedly, there were several deputy prime ministers. Another former deputy prime minister, Arkady Dvorkovich, has resigned his official positions, thought to be a tacit protest against this war. Anyway, so Surkov was meant to be creating new political parties in Ukraine who'd welcome Putin's invasion. He'd also set up Nashi within Russia, meaning like ours, which was this ultra-nationalist fan club of Putin to harass Western diplomats, follow the British Prime Minister around and harangue him if he's speaking to any human rights groups, and to assault any oppositionists, and they could do so with complete impunity. The police just let them get on with it. Okay, so Surkov even told the Financial Times in 2021, people need propaganda, most people need their heads filled with thoughts, okay? We're going to not to feed people some highly intellectual discourse. Most people eat simple foods. Generally, they consume very simple meaning beliefs. stop there. How do you think Russia will continue on the international stage with so many countries claiming genocide? Seems a long period of isolation. Yes, to some extent that's true, but Russia does have its backers. In the non-Western world, a lot of countries are neutral, even pro-Moscow in some cases. And people say, oh, this dates back to the Cold War, and to some extent that's true. But Ukraine is part of the Soviet Union too. If if the Soviets helped the anti-colonial struggle, that means the Ukrainians as well, 25% of whom were Ukrainian. When it comes to the Second World War, well, the Soviet Union wouldn't have won without Ukraine, which is 25% of its population. It was quite a close run thing, very close run in some battles. If you took away 25% of your manpower, you would have lost if you're the Soviets. Surkov and others were telling President Putin to say that Ukraine doesn't even exist, it's not actually a nation, it's just a bastardized form of Russianness, and that Russia ought to also conquer Belarus, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, with a significant Russian ethnic minorities in those Baltic states, and so on. Now, perhaps even more significant is Colonel General Sergei Beseda, who was head of the 5th Directorate of the FSB, Federalная служба безопасности, and he's currently incarcerated in Lefortovo prison, this notorious penitentiary in Moscow, the only one actually run by the FSB, quite a fall from grace, and one of its most senior officers. So he was handpicked by Putin. Putin really trusted him, but now he thinks he can't trust him. And it's not just a case of incompetence, that it must be treason. I mean, I think I go for cock-up more than conspiracy. So the 5th Directorate was actually created by Putin to oppress people inside Russia and some of the former Soviet republics. The FSB is Russia's domestic security service. The fact it was tasked to do things other former USSR countries shows that they didn't really consider them to be proper countries. China is fairly pro-Moscow, but I think they don't want this war. The high oil, gas prices, high food prices are bad for them. Western countries can afford to buy fewer things. And they don't like the precedent set. On the other hand, if it keeps the West distracted, if it weakens Western countries, maybe that is positive for them. Russia's over a barrel. The Chinese can push very hard bargains with them. Beseda has been questioned, and they held him under a false name in Lefortovo. Nevertheless, it leaked out that it was him. So Surkov mentioned earlier, he was sent to Ukraine as a personal representative of Putin. But there are other people who served in the KGB with Putin, like Boris Karpichkov, who's now dissident really, saying that Putin has really gone out of his tiny little gourd. This was just a really harebrained scheme and just completely not going to work. That the guy's gone crazy. He's fixated with his paranoid conspiracy theories, and he's inventing chimera and things like that. And so this is all totally avoidable. And this reminds me why we need checks and balances, because there's really no limit to how badly wrong this can go, and there's nobody who can put a stop to this. He doesn't need the Russian Parliament to vote funds or to vote for the war or anything like that, and no one's allowed to protest, and he can't be peacefully deposed, and on and on. That guy Karpichov said that he's on a death list, the same death list that Sergei Skripal was on, the guy who was poisoned in Salisbury back in 2008. But Putin is not that unpopular, and his popularity rating has even gone up. I think it will dip the longer this war drags on, when sanctions are really biting. Apparently consumer prices are up 16% in the last 7 weeks, and they're really going to go on rising. I think we'll reach a stage where they're not going to rise anymore, but Russia might be driven back to where they were in the late 90s, much, much lower living standards. But Putin thinks we lived through far worse in the 1990s, never mind the Second World War, people can take it. Those who are most inclined to protest, the intelligentsia, they've left as a brain drain. IT workers moving to Uzbekistan, Armenia, Georgia, perhaps ironically, elsewhere, Israel, Serbia, where they can work there. If any country starts to improve relations with Russia, they'll be massacred by domestic opinion. Well, some countries wouldn't mind that much. I mean, I know they've got Eritrea on their side, China, North Korea, sort of a rogues gallery of regimes. India's playing both sides of the street, going to extract a lot of concessions from Western countries if it's going to vote against Russia in the UN. So the domestic impact's not been that much. Yes, many thousands of people, about 15,000 people, have been arrested in Russia for anti-war protests. Out of a population of 140 million, that's not very significant. So I don't see any serious chance that Putin's going to be driven from office soon, like this year. He probably doesn't have much longer to live anyway. I think it's the Grim Reaper is going to take him out. And because of what happened with Nazarbayev, he probably thinks the only way to leave the Kremlin is carried out feet first. Yeah, it would have. There was very serious hardship. There could be the sort of mass protests that could bring him down, and I don't see anybody inside the regime ousting him. I'd love to be wrong. Okay, toodaloo.